Video 6, Constitutional Freedom. I'm Rick Nichols. I wrote the book titled Make America Financially Great. This book is based on 15 years of research that included the 1913 Federal Reserve Act and 1864 National Currency Act. I also studied the 1776 Declaration of Independence and the 1789 United States Constitution, Article 1. These two documents work together to create freedom for citizens. Citizens define freedom as doing what we want. Another way to say this is, we make decisions and we are free to follow our decisions. The opposite of freedom is enslavement. That means we have to follow the decisions made by somebody else. The Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution work together. The Declaration of Independence defines the problem, and then the U.S. Constitution solves the problem. The Declaration of Independence says that to be free, we have to make decisions. It doesn't say that we are free to do nothing. The Declaration of Independence states that we must make decisions to be free. We have to decide who to war against. We have to decide who to be at peace with. We have to decide who to form alliance agreements with. We have to decide which countries we will trade with. We must do all other acts and things which independent states may have the right to do. And we must all pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That is what I'm doing right now. I have pledged 15 years of my life, sucked my company dry to finance the time to work on this book, and my personal honor to give correct information so as not to waste the time or mislead my fellow citizens. The Declaration of Independence is associated with the saying, "No taxation without representation." That says that it's not so much the tax that we are against, but our problem is that we aren't represented in the decision-making process. Other people are making decisions for us, and that makes us slaves. The Constitution solves the problem. The Constitution sets up a system of representation known as Congress. Congress is set up based on the location within the United States that a citizen lives. Senators represent citizens based on the state they live in. Representatives represent citizens based on the neighborhood district they live in. The first thing that the U.S. Constitution sets up is Congress in Article 1, Sections 1 through 7. Then, in Section 8, the Constitution lists the decisions that Congress must make as representatives of citizens. The obvious interpretation is that only Congress shall make the decisions listed in the Constitution so as to provide representation for citizens in the decision-making process. A pertinent example today is Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 7, the Post Office. One of the options discussed is to privatize the Post Office. That means to allow a privately owned, for-profit corporation to operate the post office for a profit as a government-sponsored enterprise, which means non-government people get government power. The problem is that citizens lose representation in the decisions made by the non-government people about the post office. In other words, we become enslaved by the decisions made by non-government people. The most important decision-making power is listed as Article 1, Section 8, Paragraph 5. Congress shall have power to coin money. Here is an interpretation that has not been taught to Congress. To coin money is to create a new piece of money. A new piece of money is added to the previously coined money. The effect of coining another piece of money is to increase the inventory of money. Therefore, Article 1, Section 8.5 should be interpreted as only Congress shall increase the inventory of money. If a non-government person makes the decision to increase the inventory of money, then citizens are enslaved to follow that decision. Today, money has become the balance in a checking account. All the power of checking accounts, including the depositless deposit slip, has been given to non-government people with Congress's power to increase the inventory of money, as evidenced by the steady and dramatic increase in M3 and now M2. For example, the M2 money inventory count is based on the total of all checking account balances. Let's say that all the checking account balances in the U.S. were added together and they total $100. If 100 $1 checks were written and the balances are transferred, then when all the checks are cleared, there is still $100 in the money inventory. The problem with our system is that tomorrow there will be $110 in the M2 money inventory. The new definition of money is verifiable bank records. The records are used to determine a bank account balance. The bank account balance is fiat money authorized by the 1913 Congress. The problem is that the 2020 Congress hasn't been taught that the 1913 Federal Reserve Act authorized the checking account balance to function as legal tender. That legal tender authorization was not stated directly. It was snuck in by creating checking accounts, savings accounts, and investment accounts, and requiring banks to accept the transfer of balance from one bank to another bank. This is akin to passing a dollar bill from hand to hand in the normal transactions of life. That means that non-government people use bank records to coin money and thereby increase the M2 and M3 money inventory counts. Since Congress doesn't coin bank records yet, that means new money is created by the non-government people. That means that citizens aren't represented in the decision-making process. Therefore, citizens are enslaved to decisions made by non-government people in government-sponsored enterprises. The biggest and most powerful government-sponsored enterprise is the Federal Reserve Bank corporations. The 1913 Federal Reserve Act was written to skirt around the U.S. Constitution in an intelligent manner. The Office of the Federal Reserve System is a constitutional department created by Congress. It was given all of Congress's government power to make decisions concerning bank accounts. Surprisingly, Congress doesn't make any decisions concerning the Federal Reserve System and bank accounts. Those decisions are made by members of the Board of Governors. The members of the Board of Governors are non-government people who have government power to make decisions. The Board of Governors are paid by the profits from the Federal Reserve Bank corporations. The Federal Reserve Banks are established as privately owned for-profit corporations that are government-sponsored enterprises. The corporate structure allows them to make a profit, and then the corporate structure is used to move profit out of government hands and into Wall Street corporations. which then moves the profit into the financial bad guys' pockets. Here is the intelligent part of skirting around the Constitution. The financial bad guys who wrote the 1913 Federal Reserve Act made the Federal Reserve System sound like an agency serving Congress, but they didn't give any decision-making power to Congress. All the decision-making power was given to non-government members of the Board of Governors. The reality is, Congress is enslaved to the decisions from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. That means that Congress can't change any decisions made by the non-government members of the Board of Governors. That means that Congress can't veto any decisions made by the non-government members of the Board of Governors. This also means that the President of the United States can't veto the decisions of the non-government Board of Governors. In general, this means that citizens don't have representation in the Federal Reserve System, and that means citizens are enslaved to the decisions made by the non-government Board of Governors. Just to be clear, I don't want to destroy the Federal Reserve System. I have to say, I don't like the financial bad guys, but they are really smart and they know their business. Other than using the Federal Reserve System to infiltrate and then overthrow the United States Constitution, it works great. They built a solid system and operate it professionally. My plan is to understand the system, then outmaneuver the financial bad guys to take control of coining new money in Congress's bank account at the Federal Reserve Bank corporations, which is done with the use of a depositless deposit slip. I want to restore our constitutional freedom, which is to be represented in the decision-making process about coining money, regulating the value of money, and the exchange rate of foreign money, and other subjects listed in the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 8. The Declaration of Independence says we have to make these decisions to be free. If we don't, then we are enslaved by the decisions of other people. I don't want to be enslaved. I want to be free to make decisions and live by them. The first step is to understand the congressional document called the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, and then use that information to outmaneuver the financial bad guys. My book explains how to do that without changing any laws. I forgot to mention in previous videos that my book's appendix has a copy of the documents I have talked about. The appendix has a copy of the Declaration of Independence and the U.S. Constitution, Article 1. The appendix also has copies of the 1913 Federal Reserve Act and 1864 National Currency Act and the 1694 Charter of the Corporation of the Bank of England, amongst others. The book is titled Make America Financially Great. Thank you for listening to the research of a fellow United States of America citizen.